Hey guys, it's Lewis or Dave the Fish here, and today I'm bringing you my first ever Dark Souls top 5, and we're kicking things off with the top 5 best bosses in Dark Souls 1. Before we continue with this video guys, feel free to subscribe to my second channel where we do film related content, film, fiction, all that good stuff. But in today's video, I'm going to limit it only to the main bosses. I'm going to dedicate a separate video to, the DLC bosses, as realistically this top 5 would just be filled with only those. And obviously guys, this is just my own personal opinion. If you disagree, that's absolutely fine. Just let me know what you think in the comment section down below. With that being said, I won't delay you any further. Let's get right on to the list. Coming in at number 5 guys, we have the Bell Gargoyles, and I really like this boss purely because it was the first boss that deviated from the traditional Asylum Demon design. You had the Asylum Demon, which was a pretty good tutorial boss. You had the Taurus Demon, which is a pretty lazy rip-off in my opinion. Then you had these guys, which really were a breath of fresh air. They are, agile, quick, they have a very varied moveset. They're pretty resistant to some things, although you can exploit their weaknesses to, thunder. And, obviously they throw you the curveball where halfway through the fight, a second one shows up which pretty much exclusively breathes fire. Although they do mix up, the fire with the melee combat, which makes a very interesting boss fight. Not my personal favourite, although I think that it definitely stands out in the early game as being one of my favourite fights, and it holds up really well, even in the end game in my opinion, although that's not saying much, given, the mixed quality of the end game. But it's a pretty good boss, and I like it regardless. At the number 4 spot, we have the Gaping Dragon, and I really like this guy, purely because I hated the area he was in. The depths was a pretty bad, lackluster area in my opinion, and you can imagine my surprise on my first playthrough, finishing the depths and coming face to face with this abomination of a monster. But holy crap is he a fun fight. The spectacle is incredible. He's by far one of the largest bosses in Dark Souls 1, and it's one of the largest bosses you'll fight in the early game. His moveset isn't that complicated, although you do need to watch out for the grab and, the charge. He grabs you and makes love with your corpse, or, he charges you and you're pretty much in for a guaranteed one-shot in the early game. So, you need to watch out for that, but I really do like this guy's design. The boss arena is pretty cool, and obviously the music is, god tier. Very few Dark Souls 1 bosses have bad music, and this guy certainly isn't one of them. He is a little bit boring, and definitely on the easy side to an extent. However, due to his memorability, I will always have respect for this boss. At the number 3 spot, we have Chaos Witch Quelaag, and I really like this boss once again because of the area. Blighttown was awful, we all know this, I don't need to go into why Blighttown sucks, and having this gem of a boss fight at the end really made it all worthwhile. So why do I like this boss? Well, visually she's incredible, whether it's the swings with the fire sword, the fire AoE as you see there. That AoE, by the way, is incredibly powerful, don't get hit by it. But every time she swings that sword, it just looks so visually cool. She's not particularly difficult, mind you, although she does throw a few curveballs at you. For example, she's completely immune to fire. I know, go figure. And, she has, and, considering that fire has basically been, the weakness of every boss up until this point, it really does throw a curveball at you and forces you to adapt. Not to mention, she also has quite a bit of health. She's a tanky boss, which really does throw a few curveballs at the player, but it's all very enjoyable. The spider can spew lava all over the place, has a few quite cool AoEs. The design is pretty good. I love the area and arena. It's just a really cool boss fight that deserves recognition. Taking the number 2 spot, we have the final boss of Dark Souls 1, that is Gwyn, the Lord of Cinder. And this might be a bit of a controversial take, because there are two ways to look at Gwyn. On the one hand, you have a fight that is ridiculously difficult for Dark Souls 1 standards. Gwyn is very aggressive, his attacks do a lot of damage, he can interrupt healing very well. It's difficult to, find healing opportunities with Gwyn. And, he's very aggressive, this, that, the other, and his moveset's pretty complicated. for Dark Souls 1 standards. On the other hand, you have a fight where, well, Gwyn can be parried, simply put, and if you can get your parry timings down, this fight is beyond easy. You can essentially just parry him and make him your bitch, essentially. But I really like this fight regardless, purely because, well, there are multiple ways to do it, as I said. The music or OST to this boss is just gold. There's really nothing I can say about it. The sad, melancholy piano piece really does fit, as like the climax to this very depressing journey. The second half of Dark Souls really wasn't all that memorable for me, so Gwyn had a lot of expectations to meet, and he exceeded them in my opinion. Now, there are times where I think he's a bit easy, times that I think he's a bit hard, but I think that for what Gwyn has to offer, it really is memorable. The lore behind this guy is incredible. The fight can be a joke, or it can be, a very worthy challenge until the DLC. And I think he is worthy of me being on the list. Is he the best final boss in the series? I don't think so. Compared to, the Soul of Cinder, or, Gehrman the First Hunter, or even Radagon and the Elden Beast, I think he falls short. But for what he was at the time, I think he was a really cool fight, and he comes in at the number 2 spot. Cheeky honourable mention goes to the Iron Golem. I know that he's basic as anything, but I think his various wind-based attacks were pretty cool. He's a titan that is a very nice spectacle. I love the weapon he has. His armor's pretty cool. His moveset's not all that complicated, but it kind of makes up for it with the relatively small arena. At the end of the day, you can do crazy shit like that with him, which makes him incredibly memorable, and whilst he's not a very complex fight, he's one that I will always love for that very reason. Surprising absolutely no one is Ornstein and Smur taking the top spot on today's list. So these guys have been, praised to heaven and hell. These guys have been praised ever since Dark Souls came out, and it's not all that hard to see why. First of all, these guys are the boss of Anor Londo, the best area in, the game. That's pretty much, a common opinion by Dark Souls fans. And these guys are the perfect challenge, where essentially you have Ornstein, who's lightning fast, and, also has lightning-based attacks with his spear. And, he's not all that durable, and he's quite small, and he's easy to be staggered. Smo, on the other hand, obviously he's this lumbering foe with a giant-ass hammer, and, he's easier of the two, but he does more damage, and he's also, slower to compensate. And what I really like most about this fight is that it challenges you to adapt, where essentially in the second phase, depending on which one you killed, the other will get amped with their power. So as you can see here, Super Smau basically gets a lightning infusement on his hammer, whereas Super Ornstein basically just becomes giant and much more powerful, which I really enjoy. This fight has a lot of replay value, and I really enjoy, everything about it, from the various attacks to the, the way that the area is, the arena is cleverly designed to put distance between, the two enemies, meaning you can get hits in. I really do enjoy everything about this fight. It has very, very few flaws, and in my opinion, no fight came close to beating it until the DLC came out. Ornstein and Smo, you take the number 1 spot, and it's very well deserved in my opinion.